Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to a little talk I'm going to have with Josh DePaul from Integrating Presence on the topic of the Mandela Effect. As far as I can look up, it became what we could say within mainstream in 2009 when Fiona Broome brought it on her YouTube channel, where she talked about that she had vivid memories of recalling Nelson Mandela dying in prison in 1990s. I can't remember the specific date. And because my brain works in a dissimilar way when we talk about memories and when we talk about information streams that are part of the base program, in a more, what we could say, linear way, I will let Josh explain the Mandela Effect as he has perceived it and understood in his studies of the Mandela Effect over the years. And then later on, I will give my interpretation of how I actually perceive the Mandela Effect, which is quite dissimilar to what mainstream interpret is. Generally speaking, it is often tied to what's called collective false memory. And that's the scientific explanation. And false memory goes back to Freud, I think it is, that talked about how people can remember things in one way and others can remember it in a dissimilar way. And I can say, as a personal experience, if I talk to my sister about some of the things from our childhood, she will remember it in one way and I'll remember it in a different way. But that's not necessarily false memory. That can just be different interpretation of reality and different interpretations of the situations that we are in. When we talk about false memory, then we talk literally about some things that we perceive in one way. The classical example is Looney Tunes or Looney Tunes. And I recall them as Looney Tunes with Tunes and not Tuoons as some does. So this kind of, we have the physical evidence of something that looked in one way and then later on it looks in a different way. And that's where I will come in with my little bit of other dimensional explanations. But for Josh, talking a little bit about how he has perceived the Mandela Effect.
Well, my understanding of this is probably going to be a little bit fractured and disjointed too, but I don't feel I need to explain too much because I gather this is such a popular thing that it's in the popular culture now that everybody pretty much knows what this is about, and I don't think I can add too much to a regular definition. Look up the definition of what people had say. I will add a few things here that I think are relevant. This is a phenomena that it's well. Where should I start with this? Like Randy said, the Fiona Broome, which actually I heard a woman called Starfire Tor on the internet saying that she stole that from her. And if I'm getting this right, something where, no, I'm probably getting this wrong too. Just the whole notion of this can be kind of disjoining. But I thought she claimed that she was just going to pick a random event and make it up and then seed that out to the collective and then see how many people took the bait and said, oh yeah, it's like that. But then supposedly she just invented a random occurrence and made it up and then had all these people believing it happened one way or another. And I hadn't heard that take on it before. But when we talk about, these collective false memories that people, there's so many different examples. And since Randy's Danish, she doesn't have a lot of these reference points. You have a lot of the movie and entertainment ones, but Stouffer's stovetop stuffing, I remember that instead of just whatever they're saying it is now. Jiffy, instead of Jif, this peanut butter. There's just countless examples. One of the emblems, and I actually like the details of this. The classic one, though, and this was all started from a movie we watched. It was actually called The Mandela Effect, but it was classed as a sci-fi horror movie. And we had quite a bit of talks of what was happening in that movie. Maybe we'll go into some of it here. The biggest thing that stands out for me, if this is an effect, how do we explain such massive amounts of people, because a lot of people I've talked to, they remember it one way, and they're saying it wasn't like that never happened. How do we, if how do we account for that? Is it mass delusion? There's so many different theories and things, and I have no idea. I'm still studying this. There's whole conferences on the Mandela Effect. So that's the biggest question here, and I don't think science has it nailed down either. So I'm fascinated to hear Randy's take on this. I think that's it for now. There'll be other things popping up here and there.
Where do I want to go with this? What do I want to say? As I always say, because of course I have my ideas of what things. It's one thing that strikes me, and I must be careful here because I can't impose onto other people what they are and how they perceive themselves and what their reality perception is. So even though I have some ideas, I'm just going to leave it there when we talk about why Fiona Broome had these vivid memories of it and how it came to be. Of course, I have my ideas with that. You can hear why I'm dying to say it, but I won't say it. Okay, so that's a little bit annoying. I know that people, sorry about that. What I can say is that in my personal life, that I can talk about interception and different forms of intercepted memories that I have experienced in my own personal life, as well as dealing with the other dimensions and the different types of projects that those of you who have listened to other material on my channel, the Future Humanities channel, you know that my life has been in great details contact with other realms, as well as later on from 2000 and when was it, give or take, 13 other dimensions, as well as a lot of other extraterrestrial groups that began to become really prominent and in public, more than just what we could say the pullouts and the different types of alien quote unquote abductions that took place from the 1950s and onward, where they from 2011 and onward began what we call the holographic pull-in, where they via these different types of holographic technologies began to insert different types of code patterns, as well as local and non-local memory segments that I call interception or false memories, which are not the same as what Freud was talking about, because back then when Sigmund Freud was working with people and the collective and the ideas that he had at the time, we were under what we call the old world order reality programs, where the astral barrier and frequency fence literally kept us stuck within specific type of memories, within specific type of processing memories, as well as specific ways of how the brain worked. And for me, in the old world order programs, the astral barriers was typically linked up to the emotional field, and the mental barrier or the frequency fence was linked up to the neural network, ensuring that humanity more or less on a full scale were what we could say controlled in what they were thinking and feeling. And I talk about this in my book, The Souls of Humanity. I will put in there a lot of the information there is now slightly outdated, but it is a good historical insight to some of the remaining ripple effects of these old world order type of programs and program cubes that were situated in the fourth dimension and were linked up to different types of colonizing races that were here and have been here for the last 15,000 years. And by that, to a large degree, put humanity into what we call a quite big slumber of oblivion, literally from A to Z, and a lot of other ways to make sure that the three lower fields within each human were engineered, administered, as well as lived through the entire lifespan in a manner that ensured, I'm here picking my words again, as you can hear, I want to say something straightforward, but I'm not, but ensuring that people would, if they were waking up, they would wake up within a specific type of programs that ensured that they were pushed into a merry-go-round, rabbit holes, and other places where the awakening, the simulated awakening, would not really be an awakening. Then we had, due to the incoming extraterrestrial groups in the 1950s, they came in due to glitches in these old programs. They began breaking down as the original network, and plasma crystals began to break down that upheld the colonizers' network, that were controlling the astral bearing frequency fence. And by that, we began to have bleed-throughs and complete, in many ways, a breakdown of the original reality program. And other groups were called in as an assistance of that. And that's, for me, why the groups in the 1950s came in here, because they were called in from some of the other groups that were part of what called the Old World Order agenda. And they invited in these groups to ensure that the reality program, the Truman Show that we were part of at the time, would continue. And with that, gave access to these extraterrestrial groups from parallel universal matrices that were founded upon what we call technology. And that also ties into a complete different understanding of the different types of the Roswell incident, for instance. People talk about this happened by accident, or that it was from the parallel universal matrix that this craft or crafts fell to the ground due to malfunction and all of these things, thinking that they did that deliberately to create a backdoor and get access to different types of groups of humanity. There are other speculations which I don't want to go into as a kind of visiting the old Germany, let's just call it that way, as well as other things that you can look up on the internet as well. My opinion on that is completely dissimilar, because for me, we have had, since 15,000 years ago, we have had the different groups within humanity that was aware of what was going on, that had the ability to function inside this reality, as well as their artificially linked up realities under these different groups of colonizers. Some of these humans were of the original solar system humanities and make arrangements back then to keep their mind intact, and they became the administrators and the administrators and controllers, and what we technically understand as that group of humans that have been on top of the hierarchy inside our reality field, having operating vessels that allowed them to exist over quite extended period of time, recloning themselves and on and so forth. So my understanding is completely different than what most people have the understanding of out there. And that's why I haven't spoken about it for a very long time. Why can I talk about it now? Because we're changing, our world is changing once more. But in 2011, as I said, the technocratic groups that came here, invited here, they had finally figured out a way how to work purely and utterly holographically with humanity, and no longer needed the big pull-ins where they, in the beginning, assembled different forms of the human genome, the human organic vessel, to figure out how it actually worked. And once they had the three lower fields organized in different types of simulations and experiments, which the ones that were pulled in, they talked about back then, and that was a horror show. It still happens from time to time, but they have advanced in the manner that they don't need this type of physical form. They can just do the holographic imprint, put it into clone technology, and then do it via the clones. But since it's a holographic imprint of our high order energy system, then it ripples into our physicality. And by that, the pull-in is just as effective as if they literally pulled in out this physical form, but they don't need to do that anymore. So that's a very, very different angle. How did that come to be? How could they suddenly begin to engineer these kind of vessels? How could they begin to engineer these kind of simulations? How were that possible for them to do so? And that's what I call the event program. And for me, the Mandela Effect is tied into that. It's tied into the event program and the reprogramming of the old world order colonizing reality programs. As they began to fall apart, the technocratic races took over the programming units, let's call it that, recreated the different programs that they had from the holographic imprints of humans they had pulled in, and began to reassemble the collective memory of the astral barrier as well as the frequency fence, and created a new type of simulation program, the interactive simulation program, that became the event program, which many of you recall from 2018 was the big, or 17 I think it was the big, that now the fifth dimension would be here, and these promises of rainbows and unicorns that never really came to be, because of the grays that were behind this, and these are not the seeders, they are, for me, they are the maintainer grays that were collaborating with some of the other groups from the parallel universal matrix that has similar groups like ours. We can, for instance, the Arcturians, they have 1/3 inside the old constellation of our universal structure, and then 2/3 of them have shifted into the parallel universal matrix, which means 2/3 of them, of the Arcturians, are now part of a different type of gray. So it's complicated, people. It's not simple as saying come from there or whatever, because the overlay that they have put in is not just in our solar system, it's our entire universal structure. So that means that it goes into many, many different layers, such as I remember years ago looking into, and actually I think it was in 2012 or 2011, I can't remember, I got this very strong look up the Sagittarius arm on the internet, and I looked it up, and I remember looking at it, and I saved it for quite some time. So I revisited it on the not understanding why is this so important. But in 2017, I got again look up the Sagittarius arm, and Carl Sagan says that in a YouTube video. He says the Sagittarius arm, and Wikipedia now explains, well, that was a minor portion of it, and that was inaccurate, because it's now actually called the Orion arm. But that happened because the Orions came in 2017 and linked us up to their dark galactic core, and then we became the Orion arm because we got under the control of the Orions. And with that, the Zeta Grays and all of these things, the conglomerate that are working with the Orions. And some of the event program technologies and reprogramming was then also taken over by the Orions, and by that begin to create some of what we call the dark light configurations that are now running as a subcurrent in many levels of the collective, which are affecting quite a large portion of the people that were part of what we call the military projects, that were a secret program. Nobody knows of this. We haven't got to that yet. Most people are mostly talking about the reverse engineering of the different crafts. They have not yet touched ground with the reverse engineering of the human genome that were put into these different types of military projects that were focused about humans and not the technology, which many are talking about. Well, that will come later on into the future.
If we look at the kind of more base program level of this, we look at a police report, right? People filling out a police report, there's an accident, you have 5, 6 witnesses, and they all witness the same event. They claim, however, their accounts of it are different. So I don't know how this might play into this when we're talking about kind of subjective reality and perceptual level of things. But then when we get into these collective things where everybody agrees on something, but then the rug kind of gets pulled out from under them. This is the end result of this in the base program, right?
And I want to jump in here, because when we talk about the collective memories of, for instance, iTunes and not Looney Tunes and not Looney Tunes. Sorry about iTunes, yeah. I recall that because I watched these as a kid.
Same.
So I remember that. I remember looking at it for some odd reason. I have these specific moments where it's like I was pointed to what you need to be observant of this. When we talk about the different approaches, and okay, let me explain. If we go with the idea of as I talked about in the first segment, with the event program and how these, not as much when the Orions took over, but before with the event program with the Arcturians and the Alpha Centauri and some of the old world aura groups and the colonizing race and the humans that were part of the old reality programs, and their attempt to recalibrate some new type of program, that the purpose of that one was, of course, to lead humanity into an awakening process. They had done it prior with what we say from the 18 and 19th centuries and into the 2000s, where they were working with what we call spirituality and spiritism and all of these different approaches, trying to teach people about that life was ongoing, but it was still restricted within the astral barrier programs of spirituality so that they would remain in control. And that's the word I'm trying to avoid here, because what is control? Nobody really has control of a reality, but they were nesting upon the original reality programs and the original interactive simulation programs, and they re-engineered it already back then 15,000 years ago as part of the takeover. And these groups were under the control of other groups that were positioned in some other, the Draco systems, which we know of. And the Dracos took off in 2020, at least the larger groups, and we have remaining little scavenger groups. So things are, again, it's not simple, clear cut, and there are cycles where these groups come back because they're forced to come back, they're not present here all the time, and all of these very, very complex dynamics of the older or reality programs. Which means when I talk about it's interactive and it's a simulation, it's not a holographic simulation as the computer science simulations. It's much more complex. It's not a simulation as is suggested in the movie The Matrix. It is not a simulation as it is suggested in the Mandela Effect from movie from 2019 or a film. It's not based upon that theory that goes with computer sciences and computer ideas of how to create a simulation that runs on multiple possibilities, that branches out in different timelines and alternate realities and these kind of things. It's not in that manner. At some point later on, I will try to explain how I see things, but this is not where I want to go here, because then we branch completely off into a different discussion. But why did the Mandela Effect happen? Why did these glitches in the event program happen? And for me, and how I see it, and what I get when I look into it and look into the dimensions and the programs that were engineered by the different groups, was that they were looking into the groups that they were pulling in and literally replicated the memories of different people. And we know that people have, for instance, when the Aqua song, I'm a Barbie girl, right? We have I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. That's the typical one. But they are actually saying I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world, because they pointing towards it's their Barbie world. But because our memory is perhaps the brain finds it easier to remember a Barbie world than the Barbie world, or we could hear it differently, alluding to Josh's explanation of when people are overlooking some kind of incident. Each person will have a different reflection of it, because they were not what we could say focused in the moment. They were thinking about something else. They only had snippet of it, and then the brain fills in the blanks. That's what the brain does. It sees some things and then it fills in the blanks. And these blanks that the brain fills in are computable, to use that word, with what we know of already. So the brain can only fill in the blanks with what it already has got. I remember, again, some of you have seen that as well. You see something on the street or something on the ground or whatever. And since you can't decipher what it is right away, your brain tries very, very hard. Is it a plastic bag? Is it a hat? Is it a cat? Is it a dog? What is it? And then you have to go over there. Then you can see, oh, it's actually something else. Or the typical one, you see a branch on the ground and it is full of little, what do you call it, crooked, do you call that? And you think it's a snake, but it's not. But your brain interprets it as a snake and you respond to it as if it is a snake. So we have these incidents where the brain literally tries to fill in the blanks and come up with things itself. And many of these things that we did as children, where our brains were not developed yet, created glitches in our memory, as in kind of we heard the song I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world, and then we stuck with that idea that was the case because we didn't hear but we heard due to our personal experiences or whatever we came up with. Or I remember ABBA's song, which one is it, A Midnight Lover or something. I heard it as a letter And that got stuck with me. What was the song? I can't remember.
I don't, but the
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix one, excuse me while I kiss this guy,
Yeah.
but it's actually kiss the sky.
Yeah.
People heard it wrong.
Yeah.
But what I meant more is like we talked about C-3PO,
Yeah.
and we remembered him all one color, and
Yeah.
apparently that was never the case. And so these are the things that people agree on, and they're just like adamant that this no way that this is like that. You know, how do we explain that? And I even talked to a guy one time in a tea shop who claimed to be a Harvard professor, which was weird, but I mean, who knows? But he said people in South Africa would actually fight people to uphold their belief about how they remembered Nelson Mandela. Some did claim that he died in prison at a certain time, and then they were ready to fight each other over it, and that was really wild.
Yeah.
But how do we account for these things that people are adamant, like Luke, I am your father, but it's supposed to be, when you hear it back now, it's no, I am your father.
Yeah. And that's the whole case with the event program, because it's intrusive in all layers of reality, because it's a reality program. It's like you take, let's just play with the movie The Matrix. It's like you recode the entire program, but you need to recode it so it is similar to what we know. So we don't wake up and suddenly the sky is pink and the trees are purple and suddenly you look different or whatever. So they have taken the collective memories of people. But as I explained, since people have glitches in their memories, we perceive things differently. We perceive it inaccurately. And when we talk about the technocratic groups, they are engineered for a specific purpose from the get-go. They don't change, they don't develop, they don't go beyond their programming, let's put it that way, their biometric code systems. They are exactly from once they engineered to when they go out of functionality, they're exactly the same. They don't learn, they don't record, they don't in any ways or forms change. For that, you have to be a replicate that has genetic markers that can integrate code system and holographic teachings or information system from where they can adapt their genetic structure. These are the semi-organic ones. But the fully organic ones, they are machines, but they are very, very intelligent machines. But they are the ones that have been used in the fourth dimension as well as inside our reality field, because they can go in and out of the reality program. They have the code system to remain intact. Whereas if you do a semi-organic or a fully organic one from another dimension, they have to recalibrate when they enter into the Truman Show, when they enter into our reality field. Because frequencies, as we are part of, doesn't exist in any other reality. Science keeps telling us there's only 4% we can account for. The rest is unknowns. We don't know what that is, hence they call it dark energy and dark matter. That's the holographic energetic realities with a completely different energetic structure. And that's why some of the crafts come in and looks like orbs, and other comes in and can take on what we call a crystallized, solidified frequency form that we can recognize as a physical, tangible object. But it's only tangible as long as they want it to be. So these grays, they come in, they can go in and out. I call these crafts that they're using called jolts, because they can go into the frequency spectrum. And since these grays have that perception of things are exactly as it's supposed to be, they don't change. They come in with a machine mind that also looks at humans the same way. They didn't understand the original program that the colonizers made, where there were the ability to learn, but false learning processes or artificially created learning processes for the purpose of keeping us in the bio-emotional and mental fields that runs with the frequency fence and the astral barrier, producing what we could say kind of transformational information systems that then mimic the understanding of the original reality program that was meant as a restoration program to recalibrate original genetic structures from the timeline event. So you have these reality programs that were set in, and the grays that did that, they copy-pasted literally from the collective memories of their subjects and put it into the reality program, and hence the glitches of if a person saw it that way, they would go in and measure how many, literally as in kind of which percentage would see it this way and how many would see it the other way, and then they would say the majority saw it this way. Or if, for instance, if we have one little thing where only a few saw it, then if they hadn't any other specimens that would come in and say, okay, I saw it this way as the GIF or Jiffy or whatever, then they would take what they had and they run with it. Literally. So for me, that's the explanation I've got from these groups, is that's the reason why we have the Mandela effect, is because the reprogramming of the event program and the reality program and the information systems they had to work with from people they had pulled in, they literally scaled that up and said, this is how it is, and then allowed for glitches because the original program was already breaking down. So the question is, why did they do that? Because the controllers at that time was not ready to let go of the control. I have talked about this in some of the Earth Councils and Stellar Councils, and what we are to do with these groups of people, the breakaway civilizations and what have you, and what they have done, and that's still up for not as much, but that's not where I want to go today. But the point being is, you have a full reality program that's run for 15,000 years. It has an interactive simulation program that can simulate and reflect back to the ones that are part of it, creating what looks like a progression of the specimens inside the reality program. And it can adapt to our perception of reality, hence the collective fields. It can adapt to individualistic, how we see the world, hence the different types of perceptions. It's a very, very nuanced program that was very, very similar to the original solar system reality view programs. And I'll talk about that in my perception logs, as well as in my HAL Academy material here and there and everywhere, because that ties into a holographic energy system and how that functions in 6 dimensions. So we have a reality program that originally functioned in 6 dimensions and were capable of going up to 12 dimensions, where the base level was just 6 dimensions. That's our foundational, original holographic architecture, 6 dimensions, where we can then add in from the inner and the core domain and build up a higher energetic structure in more subtle layers of reality. So that's a completely different way of seeing things, and we were then diminished into only functioning within biofield, emotional field, and mental field, that were then built up in layers mimicking the original 12 to 21 dimensional abilities of progression inside our solar system, to downsizing into a minimum of layers of distortion energies. And then we could say, since we were not using our consciousness potentials correctly, then the base program and the astral barrier and frequency fence became part of our distortion. It became part of all of these subconscious and collective fields and whatever of distortion that are now governing the majority of humanity. So that's part of that.
That's a very great explanation, and it doesn't really conflict with science's theories on it either. You just take it way, way beyond that. Yeah. So what I think of when I see this perceptional thing, what science gives an example of, there's a certain pattern, right, too, and there'll be missing pieces, but the mind, or whatever you want to say, fills in the missing pieces, right? But some people their perception is more developed, acute, they can actually detect where there's missing pieces. So with that example in the base program, it led me to wonder, well, just use the GIF or Jiffy thing, or Stover's stovetop stuffing, is it's just stovetop stuffing or whatever, and something's missing. Was there an objective one? Was there an objective product the way it actually was, but people were adding things into it or misinterpreting it? So you had one group that wasn't actually perceiving it right, and then one group that was. Or you know what I mean? Was there actually an objective thing to it? To each of these little conflicts of the. You understand what I'm getting at here? Yeah.
Yes, I understand. Mm-hmm. What I'm getting of information of that one is that there were, as we know from different projects, sometimes it just needs to be implemented now, and then it had glitches, and too bad. It's just
That's what I was
literally
thinking too.
it was
Yeah.
close enough.
Yes.
And why did they allow for that? Well, first and foremost, with the event program and with the new technology, they were able to mind wipe. Before, we were controlled in our thought and emotional processes and stuck within specific programs, as I talk about in the Souls of Humanity book. But with the new event program, because they wanted to allow for a tailored awakening process out of the old world order programs and into a new reality setting that would lead to what they had created and wanted to create as the new Atlantis, the new fifth dimensional Earth, that they were getting people ready to awaken into via the military project setup that were linked into specific type of extraterrestrial genomes and extraterrestrial technology that would fit the reverse engineered technology they had got from these groups. And the Arcturians and some of the Greys that were part of the parallel universal matrix races, they were then been given access to create their hybrid projects inside our reality, and that was the trade-off. It all comes down to genetics. The reason, for me, the reason why there's so much focus on the technology is because that's the first step of the full disclosure. We got this technology and see how the benefit you have had of this technology. Oh, by the way, we traded it for human genetics. But we needed to do so because the world was falling apart, and these kind of good explanations.
One of the things mentioned at the front of this is when folks are awakening, they get shuffled in to certain programs that will deter them. One of the classic ones you talk about is the astral programs, right? Like the New Age distortions and stuff. The other ones of more recent note for certain dispositions, I just wanted to point out, I think, is the whole notion of flat Earth. So I think it's a complete red herring. What does it matter if the Earth is flat or round? People get so entangled in this program, and of course the whole Q thing. People that could have actually done some good in their awakening got completely sidetracked from that whole debacle. So I just wanted to point those out. I mean, there's all kinds of these. Those are the ones that come to mind. Now, the timing on this event program I found really fascinating too, because I was wondering if the holographic technology and all the things that they had to perfect in order for this thing to come forth. I'm just like, well, how long a time span were they working on it? Or did they have it all ready to go and they're waiting in the wings for their window of opportunity to come in and implement it,
Okay, I want to answer that one here because I find that's some really good thought processes there. When we talk about other dimensional races, they exist outside of time. So they can go in and out of our reality in both in space and in time. So they can go in whenever they want to recalibrate and re-engineer the different code sequences. They don't have to physically enter into a reality to change it. They can just change the original reality program in the fourth dimension. It's all happening from the fourth dimension. They can choose to go into space and into our reality if they choose to do so. And the way that we perceive time, as we know, that's what we could say momentum of energy. It's about how fast does an energy unit move from one point in space into another point in space. That's time. And the momentum of it, it's very slow, then it's long time. If it has a quick frequency, then it's short period of time. Time doesn't exist. It's movement of energy particles in this space that we call the Truman Show and our version of reality. And that's once we get into the holographic principles, we will bridge through the quantum principles to begin with, but we will let go of the quantum and atomic type of information system and go into holographic and not two-dimensional hologram and the things that are now, because people are still, in my opinion, thinking from a computer angle when they work with these quote-unquote simulations. But when we talk about extraterrestrial as well as the original solar systems civilizations, we had reality field programs that were combined and connected to our consciousness. It was combined and connected to our holographic energetic architecture. So if we change, reality changes as a response to that. So we were the solar engineers of the reality we were part of. Whatever we wanted reality to be, it became that way. But of course it had some kind of what we could say basic principles and basic rules and basic energetic laws that could not be deferred from or broken or twisted. if that happened, then the groups that chose to do so would begin to segregate. I talk about that in the whole philosophy book. And with that, we begin to understand that for a reality to exist, there has to be a joint field of understanding of this is how reality looks. And if a majority of people decides that this is the world that we want, then the world comes to be as we want it to be, as we decide it is. That's part of the councils. That's why we have councils. So we agree on this is the reality we want, because it's interactive and it responds to our consciousness and it responds to the choices and the actions we have or take. Hence, if we talk about the reality programs, if you are trying to create a reality program, we still have control of the civilization. We then begin to understand, okay, if we go with the principles that the original holographic structure of a reality field in all other dimensions are based upon direct interacting principles between the life forms and the reality field itself. Then if you're trying to take a civilization and make sure that they forget everything they are and are no longer interactive, you have to create a different type of construction, hence the 3 lower fields, hence the Truman Show, hence the re-engineering of the original reality program cubes and the original plasma crystals that upholds the reality in the 6 dimensions that connected to the core of our solar system. So there are these different aspects of a reality program that goes with a very specific type of technology and sciences we haven't adapted to yet. And that's where I come in and say, well, all of these movies and films and whatever's made out there, they always run on the technocratic approach to keep up the machine world learning. And they're trying to adapt us into quantum computers that can simulate holographic principles by working with multiple potential worlds that can be prospected into different quote-unquote code streams that again are controlled by specific rules that are technocratic, that runs computer science and qubits. They are by different types of bits, but they are made into 8th-dimensionals or 6th-dimensional, but they are still controlled by a machine. They're still controlled by frequencies or energy particles or energy waves that can function in a specific way that still mimics the world that we know of it. So they are still trying to prevent us, including with the different colliders, preventing us from accessing the original type of reality fields. The Hadron Colliders has blasted the original, what we say, atom particles into 6 subparticles, which mimics the original 6th dimension. So they're controlling everything from A to Z via this different type of technology, including the mind wiping and all of these different experiments that have been done that fed into these groups that came in the 1950s and how to work with the human mind. A lot of things, in my opinion, that people are seeing as this was part of the awakening of humanity. For me, that's actually been part of the sciences and the experiments that led to a new type of program that allows these groups to retailer and re-engineer the entire original colonizer program. Not that I wanted that to be there, that was breaking down. Just to think about some of the different projects on, I forgot what's called now, remote viewing, whatever we're talking about, these different military backed up projects that got shut down, quote unquote, were part of this participation in re-engineering the human mind, the frequency fence and the astral barrier to be able to be shifted and transferred into the event program. And that were taking place by different types of going in and out in time, as well as going in and out in space and pulling people in energetically or pulling people in physically, or just tampering around with the circumstances or the environment, creating different types of events that would change the structure of our planet, quote unquote, as we perceive it, and creating what we call ripple effect or wave patterns in the collective memory from where new segments of information could be put in that would then later on multiply throughout the different generations of humanity into becoming new collective memories in our times. And that's why that happened in 2011. Why was that important? Remember 2012, that was supposed to be where humanity would wake up. So they were under time pressure to make it happen before that. I have a memory in my own inner section of who and what I am of a complete nuclear war in 1959. We remember the Cold War, and we remember that didn't happen and go into the whole hippie movement. That's not how I remember it. So that could be one effect of where you actually have a version of reality, not an alternate timeline, but a version of reality that did play out, because they work with what we call run-throughs. So the world that's as we know of it, because it is so controlled as it is, has been relooped and have played out different scenarios to test out some of these collective re-engineering of our world as we know of it. And that's the process that we're in now as well. And that explains the last 5 years and what's been going on there, for those of you who know what I'm talking about, within the different groups of society. What does it take to change the collective understanding of what this reality is into what they want it to become by us interacting with it, by us seeing it in a specific way, by us working with it in a specific way, by us creating thought forms in a specific way. And the whole type of what you refer to, and I'm not going to repeat it, we'll just let it slide there, but what came in and some of these larger groups within humanity that shifted from the yoga and new spirituality community into something else, they were part of that project too. Can we re-engineer some of these old Pleiadian genetics, and onward and so forth? So it's a very, very complex understanding of how our reality is actually engineered, and how does the life forms that exist in these realities interact with it, and what's the purpose and function of it. And the whole purpose of all of this is, of course, to maintain control to the groups that came in and quote unquote assisted us, so that they can have their hybrid projects. And some of these things, for those of us who are from the future, we are here now to create a new type of collective understanding of what this is, so we can say we can't take away what has happened, because that's under the law of the cycles. And as I said, our original solar system reality program has limits to what it can do before it begins to break apart. It can segregate certain things, but it cannot take it away. Once it's manifested or has come into a conscious state of awareness within a group, it has to play out its content. That's the law of the cycles. But we can take off the edge of it. We can recalibrate, shift it into a different code stream where it will play out in a different way. We can alter what we can here call timelines, because that did come with the event program, where they can say, well, this must happen because the momentum of energies are now so consolidated that it must go under the law of the cycles. But what we can do is shift the reality field itself into a slightly different version, and then play it out in a simulation that then becomes quote unquote a false memory. Hence the Mandela Effect, where people are saying, well, I have experienced that. They are so sure they experienced that. And all of the signs and the stars and the moons and what have you, the law of the cycles might actually, that was necessary to play out. But because that was not in coherence with where they want to push our reality, they shifted it into simulation, and they let certain groups within humanity participate in that in quote unquote dream time, in different energetic holographic simulations linked up to clones and different types of machinery, where people will then wake up, say, I know this, I remember this, no, that was part of the simulation. That has never happened, but you were part of it in dream time, and you were part of that simulation, and then hence it has become part of your memory that is part of your three lower fields. And since you now believe it's part of your memory, you are now projecting it into reality that we are part of, and by that it can begin to manifest, because a certain portion of humans are now seeing it that way, and then it will, the simulation program, the original interactive simulation program of the original solar system, will then begin to kick in and say that's a reflection of who people are today. And if we understand that, and we really get people that are activating within the original solar system, humanities, and their original programs, hence the HAL Academy as I see it, I could be completely wrong, but I've done an honest piece of work as I recall it, and always knowing, well, testing it to the ground and seeing what does it lead to. But the idea is that if a majority of people buy into that quote unquote, or take that on and resonate with it, say, yes, I remember it the same way, then we can begin to build new collective memories that will then begin to reactivate the original holographic energetic simulation programs or interactive programs of a reality that ties up to the original technologies and the original holographic teaching system. And then we would actually truly awaken.
Wow, so much there. It leads to the bigger question here that I'll put off so I can wrap up some loose ends here. It's just so wild, and goes to your thing of the movie 2012. Like, if I remember right, you're saying that the reason that stuff didn't have to play out is because they played it out in a movie and a collective like that. But it's interesting to know it can go the other way around, where they can take a kind of a made up memory and then use it to switch over and to make it real almost, I guess.
That is another way to create a collective simulation where all who looked at it were emotionally and mentally absorbed into how that build-up or that momentum of the whole 2012 change within humanity could get an outlet through a movie. The other way around, as they have also attempted many times, is actually to create false memories via movies and make a collective groups within humanity looking at it. Because when we talk about the brain and how the brain perceives reality, then the brain do not make distinctions between what we have observed in a movie and what we are actually experiencing in the world, because it's a kind of internal process. And grown-ups, of course, are aware that this is a movie, and because we have gone into our frontal lobe and we can distinguish between the different levels of reality, but children can't. Or people that have not developed that kind of synaptic pruning in between, this is movie, this is not. We see how movies affect people. They go in and watch something, especially boys, then they come out, if they see a karate movie or whatever, they come out, then they are the character or the heroes. They enact what they have been watching. Or we saw the whole role play movement that came with Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, and how people are then suddenly enacting what they have seen in a movie, and by that they're actually exemplifying it and making it a kind of collective memory. They are suddenly living that reality, replaying some of the stuff from the Middle Ages, but putting in fairy tales and imaginary things that they have seen in the movies. Or the other very great tool, as we know of, computer games, or people that are now constantly linked up to different types of social media or what have you, and including you guys that are listening to this, and girls, by the way, and all in between. So we are here saying that the way that what the event program literally played into our midst is the ability for us to be conflated with virtual reality and enabling us to literally adapt to virtual reality and different types of programs that will allow them for a larger range of programmability that does not necessarily need enacting. We saw how they could change the entire world the last 5 years just by using social media, which takes us into why some of the larger influencers on, not people, but I'm talking about different programs here without mentioning any names, without mentioning any people, but how certain platforms have been taken over and other platforms have been generated where different types of information can be circulated within different groups of people, again with a big experiment that also went with that group I'm not mentioning the name for, but it has a specific letter, and understanding that that was a program that ran to see how do we get people to respond to computer programs that are AI funded or put on AI kind of technology, which we're also playing with now with the whole rollout of AI, and how people easily responded and used Siri and used all of these things, feeding these machines that are then linked up to the way that our neural network functions, because we are now so linked up to the different types of information systems of the social media, including the expanded speed up of how we perceive information, how quickly we adapt to information, I notice, including you, Josh, when you are on the screen, you're just like that, rolling it. So, and I'm the older generation. I can't information so quickly. And I have noticed that you think you are seeing it, but you're not. But your brain tells you, I can do this. That's another type of programming. So we are all under different types of programming, reprogramming, relooping, mind wiping, mind alteration, genetic modification. All of this is being played out now. And the last 5 years was the big test run. How far can they control this? How far can they push this? And into what version do they want to push it? And one of the big players that were back then in 2017-18 were the Niburians. They have pulled out as well. So some of the main players of the original Arcturian programs have pulled out. And that's why the event program collapsed, because it was built upon some of the ancient Niburian technologies. And the Niburian shift side are now aligned with the Orions, and they are now running under the military projects and the New Atlantis projects. So hence, the event program never unfolded as it's supposed to. But as always, there are scavengers that are taking over what others have done and what we call re-engineering it into different purposes, including crisscrossing on the sky, including all sorts of things that we are experiencing that were originally part of a different type of modification of the genetic structure, keeping it in what we call astral barrier and mental field, and biocoding in a specific way, keeping our original genetic structure locked into a specific type of DNA, which we now know is becoming fluent and are linking up to the fourth dimension, and by that begin to break down the typical institutions of what we perceive a human to be, which we're seeing with the crystal children as well as the rainbow children, how they are completely changing the institution of what it means to be human.
And lots of social programs too. There are a ton of social programs that maybe aren't as dramatic as that, but that work on the mind. So much stuff here too. The big ones I'm set on exploring perhaps is choices, and some people say each choice that we make or don't make could go into multiple timelines. Then we get, where do the individual and collective deviate and come together, and how those two come together. I will throw maybe another thing in there too. I was at the ocean this morning, and seeing the waves break, the intensity of the waves, so many different variables in there. How white the foam was, the amount of pockets of air as on each wave as it broke, how far out a wave started, the intensity, where they crossed, how they crossed once they hit, how the ripple effect, the ocean moving out as it's crashing in. It's just boundless. Anyway, so these computers, people understand some of these ideas in computer analogies, but it's fascinating how you say that, that they do this as simulations and things like that. But that would have to be a massive computer that's observing everything all the time with various influences, and it's just mind-blowing. And that's enough for now.
But the whole point is, it's not computers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's my whole point. That's beyond, things like that are beyond the capability of computers that I'm aware of.
But it's not beyond the understanding of holographic simulations and how these different programs can, because our entire reality is a holographic structure, but it's not hologram as a kind of projection of something else. It's not made by a machine. It's not virtual. It's not computed. It is, again, when we talk about the original density energies and the original energy units that comes from the original worlds that we are part of, we can keep limitations up within different types of cubes in the fourth and fifth dimension. But we're then asking, what are the properties of the fourth dimension? How does that work in reality? We know how the 3 dimensions work, and then we plot in time, as in how quickly the units move within a type of 3-dimensional space. That's quote unquote time. So that's just the momentum of energy in that space. That's time. But that's not the fourth dimension. That's a feature of the third dimension, or kind of 3-dimensional space. So what is the fourth dimension? Well, first and foremost, it's built upon completely holographic principles And holographic principles means that the unit contains the entire code of the wholeness it's part of, not some projection of a beam through some kind of technology. And it's tied intrinsically to consciousness. So in the fourth dimension, in the machine worlds, you don't have active, changeable consciousness. You have fixed point, locked in, biometrically engineered type of androids that function in a specific way to, what we could say, preserve what's left of the original genetic structure. That's part of the top of the hierarchy. And most of the original civilizations in these worlds are stasis to preserve the genetics. So they have built the machine worlds to sustain themselves for eternity, so to speak, within the third cycle, previous universal cycle types of energy units that are based upon spatial features. Spatial features are not time, space-time as we know of it. It just means different types of orbital or reality fields that can create spheres within spheres, worlds within worlds, realities within realities. But they differ due to the different types of consciousness that's there. So that's the fourth dimension, that machines and technology and beings and life forms and consciousness and energies are flexible and changeable and can change according to the change in consciousness. Hence, if you don't want reality to change, you create cubes and machines and androids that keeps up the configuration.
Yeah, it's just it's mind blowing to try to imagine a reality without time and space. Time, I that's no problem for me because that's a kind of a mental construct. But like, what does a being look like that can't exist in space?
That's a good question. Well, first and foremost, when you are in a reality field, you create an influential sphere around yourself. You are literally a spherical being. So where you have the sphere around you, where you're the nodal point in the middle of that sphere, you have a space. That's the spatial features. Because when we spilled over into this universal structure, we took with us the spatial energy configuration from the previous universal cycles, because space needs to be transformed as well into what we could say a different type of energy configuration that is in affinity with life force, as I talk about in the next universal cycles. And how that operates, I have no idea because I'm not there yet. That's the future. But I do know that spaces came from the previous universal structure, and it's spheres. These spheres can be extended and collapse, as we see it with when we look into the different energy configuration of our universe. It's orbital, and it is within rings, spheres within spheres, fields within fields, layers within layers. So that's the complexity already. So we could say that the reality field configuration came in from the previous universal cycles. We brought it with us with the master builders that had that in place already. And when we came in with our consciousness potentials of these realms that we are now part of, the whole purpose was to change space, to adapt the fixed spaces and the fixed type of technologies into being flexible and changeable according to our consciousness potentials. And why was that important? Because when you had fixed spaces and technologies, you could have wars. We had so many wars, and there were no effect of it, karma, so to speak. There were no repercussions. People could just literally do whatever they wanted, conquer space, take it over as we're seeing it now, colonizing it, and there were no repercussions. But when we talk about the way that we rebuilt the universal structures to be part of the next group of civilizations, was that once you understand that your consciousness and your choice affect your reality field, then you have instant karma. You could see it right away. This is how my influential sphere, as a spherical being, that is, the sphere defines my space, my personal space, so to speak, but it also holds my different layers of complex consciousness structures I have chosen to build in different realities. So my worlds that I am part of, as part of the fourth and fifth dimension and sixth, will reflect who I am as a consciousness being. So if I am fully benevolent, I will create benevolent worlds. If I'm fully malevolent, I will create malevolent worlds. We will be the creators of the worlds that we are part of by our influential spheres that will draw in energy units from our surroundings and begin to create that personalized, individualistic type of world. If I then get others to join me in a council, then I have a full reality field.
Mind blowing. And was thinking earlier about a lot of this stuff administered from the 4D, but then that begs to wonder what trickles down above it and how it works. It's just complicated enough in the 4D. Then who's pulling the strings, or how are the strings pulled above that? And I don't know what's relevant to go into for this conversation, but just to kind of see how vast this thing can go as an example here.
And that's why the different groups that want to remain in previous universal cycles, they have these pillars or towers that are hierarchically built up, where you have these different groups that operate on different fixed types of dimensions that are held in place by different types of cubes that are creating different types of realities that are in a manner that they can control. In the original Pillar project, all of this changed as we grew. Then we would create the next level. It was not there to begin with. It had the potentials for it, the possibilities and probabilities, but we would develop within that realm, that domain. And once we had done that there, we would move into the next, where we would become co-creators with what we already had brought with us, and there see how does this type of consciousness function in this type of energy, in this type of 6th and 7th and 8th dimension of the middle domains. How does our priorly developed 4th, 5th, and 6th type of dimensional awareness compute or work with this other type of dimensions, where it become more and more refined and more subtle? So what we would make of choices would have a larger impact. You see, the more dense the energies are, the less impact our consciousness has on reality. Hence the trickling down to the bio and emotional mental field. But if we go into the original holographic potentials and the refinement of the energies, then literally we can become, as Oppenheimer said, destroyers of worlds just by our who and what we are. Hence the segregation dynamics. If you want to play around with that one, you can create your own space and you can demolish your own space. But here in our vicinity here, we don't play that way. So that's part of that one. Anyways, Josh, I think that we have covered so much ground here.
We have. Before, there's only like 3 other things. The gathering of the data on the humans, how they do that, would fascinate me, how on such a large scale.
And that's the quick question. Pull-ins, scanning, cube scanning.
There we go.
They have cubes in the 4th dimension. They are scanning us all the time. They're monitoring us all the time. Mm-hmm. We are literally under constant monitoring and reading. They know us from A to Z. They can scan our entire energy system, replicate it, put it into simulation programs, and run whatever they want with it and alter it wherever they want, put it back into us, and we won't even know the difference. And by that, create the different scenarios that they want.
And you've talked about that. And you also mentioned the true original worlds. I'm sure in a few of your books you've mentioned like painting a picture of what that is actually like beyond the quantum field and the things you said today. But I don't know if there's anything to refer people to that. And then the biggest thing that I think overall is memory. Okay, that's what this huge part of this is all about. The forgetting, the remembering, how memory itself works in our reality, if it differs in others, or I guess what are the basics that people need to know to regain memories and to vet memories? And what should they remember besides their past lives? A lot.
That's the whole Academy material.
There we go.
That's just all of it. But let me just sum it down to a very, very simple thing. Science tells us that our memory is part of a hippocampus area in the middle of our brain. It's connected to the limbic system and is part of the gray matter that our engineers and codes, quote unquote, different types of memories, selects different type of neural networks that are then monitoring and using, quote unquote, the coding for what is most functional for us to be as human beings. Of course, for me, it's clear memory are what's in the distortion fields. Human memories, as we are now, are part of emotional patterns in your emotional field, the 9 layers of females, 7 layers of males, I talk about this in the reconfiguration science course material. And then we have the 5 mental layers that goes with mental processes. All of that's the human memories. It's not the brain, it's not the neurons, it's not the neural network. The brain is just a computer. It picks in information layers from these subtle energies that are part of our re-engineered lower Holster's vessel that we are part of. So when we talk about the original civilizations and extraterrestrial civilizations, they don't have memories. They have cubes, they have systems they can connect to, they have what we could say expansion of their awareness. If they want to figure out how things work, as I do as well, I expand my awareness into it, I look at it, I focus on it, I get the information from it. I don't need memory. I don't need to recall anything. So when I talk about reconnecting to a holographic energetic structure, and I do use the human word of memory and say I'm recalling past lives, what I'm actually doing is I'm just reading my holographic energetic structure, the code systems that are there. I'm downloading it as a program into my brain, and then my brain interprets it as a memory. But it is a kind of a what we could call a holographic energetic code system that I integrate into my human brain, which then computes it into information, and then I can expand it into my influential sphere, see through the different dimensions I have created and engineered there, and then I can roll it out and see, oh, this is how I operate there, like a holographic screen, not memory, but like a full film where I can go into all sorts of details. These are the true memories, quote unquote, my own what we could say incorporated complexity patterns of my prior existences, which are part of coded in my original holographic energetic architecture. Whereas the false memory, if I go into that one, seeing it literally as a movie, and I go in and I try to take a cup, or if that's there, or I go into a craft or whatever it is, and I try to do something, then it can't do it. Then it glitches. Whereas if it's my own holographic memory, quote unquote memory or recall or energy pattern that belongs to my original architecture, well, then I become part of it. It completely consumes me with all of my senses, all of my awareness, and I'm back there because time doesn't exist. I am literally traveling or sojourning or remote viewing or remote interacting or re-interacting with my original consciousness potentials and my original what is coded into my holographic architecture. Because the whole point of the energy system, the holographic energetic architecture, is this coding. We are coding in, not a computer program, but we are literally taking all of these little transformational processes and choices and experiences, and they become a pattern. They become a little light filament. They become light code, if you like, that goes in and amplifies a holographic energetic structure, making it more and more complex until all 6 lower dimensions of organic vessel, outer domain, energy systems, middle domain are able to light up to such a degree that we become light orbs in a huge, humongous capacity that goes from more dense core, as in kind of when we talk from this angle, the density will then be according to the type of vessel we choose to have, and then it will become more and more subtle into the outskirts of it. But we can also do the other way around, where the outskirts, as we're having now, the outer rim is dense, and then the core of it is this high vibration that connects to the core domains. And then we can decide, that's the what we can say the reconfiguration is, that then we shed off the dense layers of the outer layers and become our core domain version, and that's why we typically spill over into a new refined type of consciousness and energy that then are fueled with what we understand as life force. Because life force will be built out of the trinity structure or the dual structure of consciousness and energy units that goes into transformational processes in different reality fields. And the whole sole purpose of this is a huge transformation of us, reality, and everything that was prior to all civilizations, so that everybody can do the elevation into the next realms and the next cycles that will be based upon completely new features. Yeah, so that was a bit of a portion there.
Beautiful. I didn't even have to say, and all that with no separation.
Okay. All right. Well, people, thank you for listening in. That's my best take on the Mandela effect. And I've been sitting on this information for years. And thank you for listening in. And as things and circumstances allow for it, of course, I will share more of what I know and what I have learned over my time here on this planet, and as well as in the other realms. But for now, I think that suffices. And until next time, take care.
And I trust you all were blown away as I was.